Korean Mafia boss stood speechless when his black maid started training his son to be a warrior. "What the hell do you think you are doing with my son?" Jihoon's voice echoed through the basement as his hand gripped the gun at his side. Zara didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She simply looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Your son came to me crying and bleeding because boys at his school beat him again. He begged me not to tell you. Do you want to know why? Because he is terrified of disappointing the great Kang Jihoon. So before you point that gun at the only person your son trusts, ask yourself when was the last time he told you anything." Jihoon's hand dropped. His chest tightened. He had no answer. Behind Zara, his 9-year-old son stood frozen, watching, waiting, and for the first time in years, Seo-jun wasn't crying. He was standing tall, fists clenched, ready. "Let me take you back to where this all began. Welcome to Secret Desires Lovers. Please drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. Your support is essential for us to continue bringing you these incredible stories." 3 weeks earlier, Zara Williams stepped out of the taxi and stared up at the mansion that would become her new home. The Kang estate sat high in the Hollywood Hills like a fortress, all glass and steel and intimidation. She clutched her single suitcase and took a deep breath. This was her fresh start, her escape. 2,000 miles from Chicago and the man who had made her life a living nightmare. The job listing had been simple: live-in housekeeper needed for private residence. Discretion required. Generous compensation. What it failed to mention was that the residence belonged to one of the most powerful Korean mafia bosses on the West Coast, or that stepping through those gates would change her life forever. A stern-faced woman in her 50s greeted Zara at the door. "I am Mrs. Park, head of household staff. You must be Miss Williams." Zara nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity." Mrs. Park studied her with sharp eyes, taking in the faded bruise on Zara's wrist that her sleeve couldn't quite hide. "You come with excellent references, but references mean nothing in this house. Loyalty means everything. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good. Follow me. Mr. Kang will want to meet you before you begin." The interior of the mansion was breathtaking. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than Zara had made in her entire fighting career. But beneath the beauty there was a coldness, a silence that felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. Mrs. Park led her to a massive oak door and knocked twice. "Enter." The voice from inside was deep, commanding, the kind of voice that expected obedience without question. Zara stepped into the office of Kang Jihoon and felt the air shift around her. He sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a small aircraft carrier, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. His face was striking, sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He was handsome in a dangerous way, the kind of handsome that warned you to keep your distance. "Miss Williams." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Zara sat, keeping her spine straight, her eyes steady. She had learned long ago never to show fear to powerful men. It only made them hungry. Jihoon studied a file in front of him. Her file, she realized. "You were a fighter. MMA. Amateur circuit. 3 years undefeated until a shoulder injury ended your career." Zara's jaw tightened. "That's correct. And now you want to clean houses. I want a fresh start." Jihoon's eyes lifted to meet hers. There was something unreadable in his gaze. "Fresh starts are expensive. What are you running from, Miss Williams?" The question caught her off guard, but she held his stare. "With respect, Mr. Kang, my past is my own. What matters is that I show up. I work hard, and I keep my mouth shut. Is that not what you require?" A ghost of a smile crossed Jihoon's lips. "You have courage. Good. You will need it in this house." He closed the file. "Mrs. Park will show you to your quarters. You begin tomorrow at 6. Do not be late." "I am never late, Mr. Kang." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "One more thing, Miss Williams. My son Seo-jun. He is not to be disturbed. He prefers solitude. Respect that." Zara nodded. "Of course." But even as she walked away, something about the way Jihoon said those words stayed with her. He prefers solitude. It sounded less like a preference and more like a wound. Zara didn't see Seo Jun for the first 3 days. She heard him, though. Small footsteps in hallways that went silent whenever she appeared. A bedroom door clicking shut just as she rounded a corner. The boy was a ghost in his own home. Invisible. Deliberately so. On the 4th day, she finally caught a glimpse of him. A small figure with his father's dark eyes and a sadness that seemed far too heavy for a 9-year-old. He was sitting alone in the garden, hunched over a handheld video game. His school uniform was pristine, but his shoulders were curled inward, protective, defeated. Zara recognized that posture. She had worn it herself as a child, before her grandmother had taught her to stand tall, before she learned that her body could be a weapon instead of a target. She wanted to approach him, but she remembered Jihoon's warning, so she simply continued with her work, pretending not to notice, pretending her heart didn't ache for the lonely boy in the garden. Everything changed on the 7th day. Zara was cleaning the library when she heard it, a muffled sound coming from the garden shed. She set down her supplies and followed the noise, pushing open the shed door slowly. What she found made her blood run cold. Seo Jun curled up in the corner, his school uniform torn at the collar, his lips split and bleeding, tears streaming down his face as he tried desperately to muffle his sobs with his small hands. "Oh, sweetheart." Zara dropped to her knees beside him. "What happened? Who did this to you?" Seo Jun flinched away from her, eyes wide with panic. "Please don't tell my father. Please." His voice was barely a whisper. "He'll be so angry. He'll think I'm weak. He already thinks I'm weak." Zara's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. "I'm not going to tell anyone anything you don't want me to. Okay, but I need to clean that cut. Can I do that?" The boy hesitated, then nodded slowly. Zara retrieved the first aid kit from the main house and returned to the shed. She cleaned his wound with gentle hands, working in silence until his breathing steadied. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked softly. Seo Jun stared at the ground. "There are boys at school. They say my father is a criminal. They say I'm the son of a monster. And because I'm small, because I don't fight back, they hit me. Every day they hit me." Zara felt rage building in her chest. Not at the boy, at the world that had failed him. "Have you told your father?" Seo Jun shook his head violently. "I can't. He has so many enemies already. Real ones. Dangerous ones. He doesn't need to know that his own son can't even handle some kids at school. He would be so disappointed." Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat down on the dusty floor beside him, not caring about her uniform, not caring about anything except the broken child in front of her. "Can I tell you a story?" she asked. Seo Jun looked at her with cautious curiosity. "Okay, when I was about your age, I was the only black girl in my neighborhood, and the other kids, they were cruel. They pushed me, they pulled my hair, they told me I didn't belong. Every day I came home crying, feeling like I was worthless." Seo Jun's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "My grandmother saw what was happening, and she didn't go to the school. She didn't yell at the other parents. Instead, she took me to her backyard, and she taught me to fight. Like punching." Seo Jun asked. Zara smiled. "Like everything. Punching, kicking, blocking. But more than that. She taught me that my body was not something to be ashamed of. It was something powerful, something that could protect me. She taught me that being strong doesn't mean hurting others. It means never letting others make you feel small." Seo Jun was silent, processing. Then, "Do you think? Could you teach me?" The question hung in the air between them. Zara knew she should say no. She was just the maid. This wasn't her place. Jihoon had specifically told her not to disturb his son. But looking into those desperate, hopeful eyes, she couldn't refuse. "Yes," she said, "I can teach you, but it has to be our secret. At least for now. Can you keep a secret?" Seo Jun nodded eagerly, the first spark of light she had seen in his eyes since arriving. "Then we start tomorrow. 5 a.m. In the basement, before anyone else wakes up. Can you do that?" "I can do that." His voice was stronger now, more certain. "Good." Zara stood and offered him her hand. Now let's get you cleaned up before anyone sees. As they walked back to the house together, Zara knew she was crossing a line. But some lines were meant to be crossed. Some rules were meant to be broken. And if she could give this boy even a fraction of the strength her grandmother had given her, it would be worth whatever consequences followed. The next morning at exactly 5 a.m., Zara descended the stairs to the basement, half expecting to find it empty, half expecting Seo Jun to have changed his mind in the cold light of a new day. But he was there, standing in the center of the room, still in his pajamas, his small fists clenched at his sides, determination written across his young face. "You came," she said. "You said 5 a.m. He replied, "I'm never late." Zara smiled. Something his father had said to her on her first day echoed in those words. The boy was more like Jihun than either of them realized. "All right, little warrior, let's begin." She started with the basics: breathing, centering, finding your balance. She taught him how to stand so that no one could knock him down, how to root his feet to the ground like a tree, how to breathe through fear until it became fuel. Seo Jun absorbed every word, every movement. He was clumsy at first, uncoordinated, his small body unused to the demands she was placing on it. But he never complained, never asked to stop. When he fell, he got back up. When he failed a technique, he tried again. By the end of that first session, his pajamas were soaked with sweat and his legs were trembling. But his eyes were alive. "Same time tomorrow?" Zara asked. "Same time tomorrow," he confirmed. And so their secret began. For the next 2 weeks, they met every morning without fail. Zara taught him stances and strikes, blocks and breathing. She taught him Korean terminology, connecting him to the heritage his father rarely spoke about. She taught him that discipline was more powerful than anger, that control was more valuable than chaos. And slowly, day by day, Seo Jun began to transform. His posture changed first. Shoulders back, head high. He stopped flinching at sudden sounds, stopped shrinking when adults entered the room. His teachers noticed. His classmates noticed. Even Mrs. Park commented that the young master seemed different lately, more present. But it was Jihun who noticed most of all. He began finding excuses to be home during the day. Paperwork that could have been done at the office. Meetings that could have been phone calls. He watched Zara move through his house with an efficiency and grace that captivated him. He listened to her hum while she worked. Soft melodies that made the mansion feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home. And he watched his son, searching for the source of the change he couldn't explain. One evening, Jihun found himself in the kitchen doorway, watching Zara prepare Seo Jun's favorite snack. She moved with the same fluid precision he had seen in fighters, in soldiers, in people who understood their bodies as instruments. "You were more than an amateur," he said. Zara turned, unsurprised by his presence. She had felt him watching. "I was good enough to go pro. Before the injury. What happened? A man happened," she said simply, the kind who couldn't stand to see a woman stronger than him. Jihun's jaw tightened, understanding passing between them without words. He wanted to ask more. But he recognized the walls she had built around that part of her story. Walls he had no right to breach. Yet, "My son seems happier lately," he said instead. "Children are resilient when they feel safe." Jihun studied her. "You make him feel safe." "I try." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and something shifted in the air between them, something neither of them was ready to name. "Thank you," Jihun said quietly, "for whatever you are doing. Thank you." He turned and walked away, leaving Zara with a racing heart and a growing realization that this job had become far more complicated than she ever intended. The next morning, Seo Jun arrived for training with a bruise-free face and a smile. "Something happened yesterday," he announced. "One of the boys who always pushes me. He tried again. But this time I didn't fall. I used the stance you taught me, and I just stood there, like a mountain, and he didn't know what to do. So he left." Zara's heart swelled with pride. "That's incredible, Seo Jun. How did it feel?" "Felt." He paused, searching for the word. "Felt powerful. Not like I wanted to hurt him, but like he couldn't hurt me anymore. That's exactly right. Zara knelt down to his level. Real power isn't about hurting others. It's about knowing that you are strong enough to protect yourself, and choosing not to use that strength for violence unless you absolutely have to. Seo Jun nodded solemnly. That's what I want. I want to be strong like that. Strong like you. Zara pulled him into a hug. The first physical affection she had shown him since they began. You already are little warrior. You just needed someone to show you. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that Jihun had woken early that morning, drawn from sleep by a nightmare about losing his son. He had wandered the house searching for something he couldn't name, and he had found himself at the top of the basement stairs, watching, listening, seeing everything. And for the first time in years, the great Kong Jihun felt tears on his face. Jihun stood there for a long time, watching his son laugh, watching his son move with confidence, watching the woman he had hired to clean his house give his boy something he himself had failed to provide. Hope. But hope in the Kong household was always temporary. And the next morning, everything came crashing down. Jihun woke at 4:30, his mind restless, his heart heavy with questions he didn't know how to ask. He made his way through the silent house, following a sound he couldn't quite identify. It led him to the basement stairs, and then down into the training space his son and his maid had created without his knowledge. He watched from the shadows as Zara guided Seo Jun through a series of strikes, her voice calm and encouraging, his son's movements precise and deliberate. The boy who had hidden from his own shadow was now throwing punches with purpose, and something inside Jihun cracked wide open. He stepped forward into the light, his presence filling the room like a storm. What the hell do you think you are doing with my son? The words came out harsher than he intended, fueled by a cocktail of emotions he couldn't separate. Fear, jealousy, shame, gratitude, all of it tangled together into something that sounded like rage. Zara turned to face him. And she didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She met his eyes with a steadiness that made him feel like he was the one being interrogated. Your son came to me crying and bleeding because boys at his school beat him again. He begged me not to tell you. Do you want to know why? Because he is terrified of disappointing the great Kong Jihun. So before you point that gun at the only person your son trusts, ask yourself when was the last time he told you anything. Jihun's hand dropped to his side. The gun he hadn't even realized he was gripping suddenly felt impossibly heavy. He looked past Zara to his son. Seo Jun stood frozen. But he wasn't cowering. He wasn't crying. He was standing tall, fists clenched, ready to defend the woman who had taught him to be brave. And in that moment Jihun saw everything clearly. His son didn't need more protection. He needed more presence. He didn't need a powerful father. He needed a loving one. Seo Jun Jihun's voice cracked. Is this true? Have you been getting hurt at school? The boy's lower lip trembled, but he held his ground. Yes, Appa. For months. But I didn't want you to think I was weak. I didn't want you to be ashamed of me. Jihun crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of his son, pulling him into an embrace so tight it seemed to squeeze years of distance out of both of them. I could never be ashamed of you. Never. You are the only thing in this world that matters to me. Do you understand? The only thing. Seo Jun's arms wrapped around his father's neck. And finally the tears came. But they were different now. They were release, relief, the beginning of healing. Over Seo Jun's shoulder Jihun's eyes found Zara. She stood apart from them, arms crossed, guarding her heart against the scene unfolding before her. Thank you. Jihun mouthed silently. Zara nodded once, then quietly slipped up the stairs, giving father and son the privacy they needed. Later that evening Jihun found her in the garden, sitting on the same bench where Seo Jun had played his video games in lonely silence just weeks before. May I? He gestured to the space beside her. It's your bench, Mr. Kong. Jihun. He sat down, leaving a respectful distance between them. Please, call me Jihun. Zara studied him, seeing something different in his face. The armor he usually wore had been stripped away, leaving behind a man who looked exhausted, vulnerable, human. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I overreacted this morning. I was scared and confused and I took it out on you. That was wrong. You were protecting your son. I understand that." "No." Jihun shook his head. "You were protecting my son. I was angry that someone else could reach him when I couldn't. That a stranger could give him what his own father failed to provide." "You're not a failure," Zara said quietly. "You're just a man trying to survive an impossible situation. Raising a child alone. Running an empire. Carrying the weight of 100 enemies on your shoulders. Something had to give. Doesn't mean you don't love him." Jihun was silent for a long moment. "When did you become so wise?" "My grandmother." Zara smiled sadly. "She raised me after my parents died. Taught me everything I know. About fighting. About strength. About love. She sounds remarkable. She would have liked Seo Jun. Would have said he has warrior spirit." "He does." Jihun agreed. "Because of you." Their eyes met in the fading light, and something passed between them. An understanding. Connection. The first fragile thread of something neither of them had expected to find. "I want you to continue training him," Jihun said, officially. "With my blessing." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He paused. "And I want to learn too. If you're willing to teach me." Zara raised an eyebrow. "The great Kong Jihun wants to learn from his maid. The great Kong Jihun wants to learn from the woman who saved his son. There's a difference." For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Zara laughed. A real laugh. Full and warm and unguarded. "All right," she said. "But I won't go easy on you. I wouldn't expect anything less." The weeks that followed were the happiest any of them had known in years. Morning training sessions became family time, with Jihun joining Zara and Seo Jun in the basement before dawn. He was clumsy and awkward, his body unused to the discipline required, but he showed up every day without fail. And Seo Jun beamed with pride watching his powerful father struggle through basic stances. "You're doing it wrong, Appa," the boy would say. "Your foot needs to be here, like this." And Jihun would adjust, would listen, would let his 9-year-old son teach him. And in doing so he taught Seo Jun something far more valuable than any technique. He taught him that strength meant being humble enough to learn. Being brave enough to be vulnerable. The dynamic between Jihun and Zara shifted too. Professional distance gave way to lingering glances. Accidental touches that neither of them pulled away from quickly enough. Conversations that stretched late into the night. About their past, their fears, their dreams. Jihun learned about Marcus, the ex-boyfriend who had shattered Zara's shoulder and nearly shattered her spirit. He learned about the months of recovery, the years of rebuilding, the courage it had taken to start over in a city where she knew no one. Zara learned about Min-ji, Jihun's wife, who had died bringing Seo Jun into the world. She learned about the guilt he carried, the feeling that he had chosen the baby over the mother, the fear that Seo Jun would grow up to resent him for it. They were two broken people, finding in each other the missing pieces they hadn't known they needed. But happiness in the Kong world was always borrowed, and the debt always came due. It started with small things. A car that seemed to follow Zara to the grocery store. A feeling of being watched that she couldn't shake. She mentioned it to Jihun and his face went pale. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I should have told you weeks ago." "What is it?" "I have enemies. Powerful ones. A Vietnamese gang called the Nguyen family. They've been pushing into my territory for months, trying to take what's mine. So far I've held them off. But what, Jihun?" He took a breath. "There's a mole in my organization. Someone feeding them information. And I think they know about you. About what you mean to me. To Seo Jun." Zara felt ice spread through her veins. "What do we do?" "I'm handling it. I have my best men working on identifying the traitor. And I've increased security around the house. Around Seo Jun's school. You're safe. Promise." But promises in the criminal underworld were written in sand. And the tide was coming in. 3 days later Zara arrived at Seo Jun's school to pick him up. But he wasn't there. The teacher said a man had come. claimed to be his uncle, had all the right paperwork, had taken the boy 30 minutes earlier. Zara's world tilted on its axis. She called Jihun, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. They have him, she choked out. Jihun, they took Seo Jun. The silence on the other end was terrifying. Then Jihun's voice, cold as death. I know, they just called. They want me to surrender my territory. All of it. In exchange for his safe return. What are you going to do? Whatever it takes to bring my son home. Within an hour, the mansion had transformed into a war room. Jihun's men filled every corner. Maps spread across tables. Weapons being checked and loaded. The air was thick with tension and barely contained violence. Zara stood apart from it all. Feeling useless. Feeling responsible. If she had been there to pick him up on time. If she hadn't stopped to buy those flowers for the kitchen table. If she had been faster. This isn't your fault. Jihun appeared beside her, reading her thoughts. I should have been there. They would have taken him anyway. They were watching, waiting for the right moment. You couldn't have stopped this. Zara looked up at him, her eyes burning with unshed tears. I know where they are. Jihun went still. What? The Nguyen family. I know their operation. From my fighting days. I used to train at a gym they owned. Before I knew what they really were. There's a warehouse on the east side, near the port. That's where they take people they want to disappear. How sure are you? Sure enough. Jihun's jaw tightened. You're not coming. It's too dangerous. Zara grabbed his arm. That boy is my son in every way that matters. I taught him to be brave. I'm not going to hide in this house while he needs me. If something happens to you, then it happens. She cut him off. But I won't let fear stop me from protecting my family. Isn't that what you've been doing your whole life? Jihun stared at her, seeing the same fire that had captivated him from the first moment she refused to back down in his office. The same strength that had saved his son when he couldn't. Okay, he said finally, but you stay with me, no matter what. Do you understand? I understand. Before they left, before they walked into whatever waited for them at that warehouse. Jihun pulled her aside. Away from his men. Away from the chaos. There's something I need to say. In case we don't. Zara shook her head. Don't say goodbye. It's not goodbye. He cupped her face in his hands. It's the opposite. I love you, Zara Williams. I've been falling in love with you since the day you refused to apologize for making my son strong. And whatever happens tonight, I need you to know that. Zara's tears finally fell. I love you too, both of you, more than I thought I could ever love anyone again. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of everything they might never get to say. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. Let's go bring our son home. The warehouse was exactly where Zara remembered. A rotting structure on the edge of the harbor, surrounded by guards who didn't expect resistance. Jihun's men moved with surgical precision, taking out the perimeter security in silence. Zara stayed close to Jihun, her body remembering movements she had buried for years. When a guard appeared from the shadows, she took him down with an elbow strike before Jihun could even raise his weapon. He looked at her with surprise and something like admiration. You're full of surprises. You haven't seen anything yet. They found Seo Jun in a back room, tied to a chair, blindfolded, trembling, but alive. Alive and unharmed. When Zara pulled off his blindfold, the first thing he saw was her face. Amma, he sobbed. I knew you'd come. I knew it. She gathered him in her arms, cutting through his restraints with a knife she had taken from a fallen guard. I'm here, baby. I've got you. You're safe now. Jihun dropped to his knees beside them, wrapping his arms around both of them. His family, his whole world contained in that single embrace. But they weren't out yet. The leader of the Nguyen family appeared in the doorway, flanked by armed men, a slow smile spreading across his face. Touching, he said. The mighty Kong Jihun reduced to a sobbing mess over a woman and a child. How disappointing. Jihun rose slowly, positioning himself between his family and the threat. This is between us. Let them go. Oh, but that's where you're wrong. They are the leverage. They are the point. Surrender everything or watch them die right here. Zara felt Seo Jun trembling against her. She leaned down and whispered in his ear. Remember what I taught you. Find your center. Breathe. She felt his small body steady, his breathing slow, and she knew he would be okay. Whatever happened next, he would be okay. She stood up, stepping forward to stand beside Jihun. You made a mistake, she said calmly. The Nguyen leader laughed. And what mistake is that? You assumed I was just the maid. She moved before anyone could react. Years of training flooding back into her muscles. She disarmed the nearest guard, used him as a shield, created an opening. Jihun didn't hesitate. He and his men surged forward. And in the chaos that followed, in the violence and the noise and the desperate fight for survival, Zara felt something sharp pierce her side. She didn't stop, couldn't stop, not until Seo Jun was safe, not until the last threat was neutralized, not until Jihun was holding her in his arms as her blood soaked through his shirt. Stay with me, he begged. Zara, please, stay with me. She wanted to answer, wanted to tell him she wasn't going anywhere, but the darkness was calling. And she was so very tired. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was Seo Jun's voice. Yama, don't leave me. Please, Yama, don't leave. She woke 3 days later in a private hospital room. Sunlight streaming through the windows, fresh flowers on every surface, and 2 figures slumped in chairs beside her bed. Jihun holding Seo Jun, both of them asleep, both of them refusing to leave her side. Hey, she croaked, her throat dry and raw. Jihun's eyes flew open. He was at her side in an instant, tears streaming down his face. Don't you ever do that to me again. Do you hear me? Never again. I'll try. She managed a weak smile. How's our son? Seo Jun stirred at the sound of her voice. When he saw her eyes open, he launched himself onto the bed, careful of her bandages but needing to be close. You came back, he whispered. You promised you wouldn't leave and you came back. I told you, little warrior. I'm not going anywhere. 6 months later, the Kong mansion was unrecognizable. Not the structure itself, but the energy within it. Laughter echoed through hallways that once knew only silence. Music played in kitchens that once felt cold and institutional. And every morning before dawn, 3 figures gathered in the basement for training that had become ritual. Sacred. The foundation of their family. Jihun had kept his word. He had stepped back from the violent aspects of his organization, handed control to Jun Hook and focused on legitimate business interests. It meant less power, less money, but it meant coming home to the 2 people he loved without blood on his hands. And that was worth everything. Zara's scar had healed into a pale line across her ribs, a reminder of the night she had nearly died protecting her family. She wore it proudly, like a badge of honor. Seo Jun had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. The scared boy who once hid in garden sheds now walked through his school with quiet confidence. The bullies had long since learned to leave him alone. Some had even become friends, drawn to his gentle strength and unshakable self-assurance. And on the day of his first martial arts tournament, everything came full circle. Seo Jun won 3 matches, each one demonstrating the skills and discipline Zara had taught him. But it was after the trophy ceremony that the real victory occurred. Jihun took the stage, microphone in hand, heart pounding with nervousness he hadn't felt since his first days as a young man trying to prove himself. I know this is unusual, he said, his voice filling the auditorium, but I've learned that the best moments in life often are. He turned to where Zara stood with Seo Jun, both of them watching with confusion. 8 months ago, a woman walked into my home expecting to clean houses, and instead she cleaned out all the darkness that had been living in our hearts. She taught my son to be brave. She taught me to be present. She taught both of us that strength without love is worthless. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a velvet box that made Zara's hands fly to her mouth. Zara Williams, you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. You fought for my son when you didn't have to. You loved me when I didn't deserve it. You became our family when we didn't even know we were looking for one. Seo Jun ran forward clutching a bouquet of flowers, grinning from ear to ear. Say yes, Yama. I helped pick the ring. The crowd laughed through their tears. Will you marry me? Jihoon asked. Will you make us official? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your love? Zara dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. Yes forever. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the auditorium erupted in applause. 3 years later, the basement dojo had expanded into a proper training studio. Zara ran self-defense classes for underprivileged youth, teaching children the same lessons her grandmother had taught her. Jihoon's restaurants had become a successful chain. Legitimate, clean, something Seo-jun could be proud to inherit one day. And their family had grown. Twin girls. 2 years old and already trying to mimic their big brother's martial arts moves. Seo-jun at 12 was now a junior black belt and Zara's assistant instructor. He took his role as older brother with the same dedication he brought to everything else. On the anniversary of their first training session, the family gathered in the dojo. Seo-jun demonstrating stances for his sisters, while Jihoon wrapped his arms around Zara and watched. Any regrets? He asked, their ritual question. The one they asked each other on every anniversary and milestone. Zara leaned into his warmth, watching their children, feeling the fullness of a life she never dreamed possible. Only one, she said. His arms tightened. What? That I almost didn't take that Maid job. He laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Thank God you did. Seo-jun called out to them. Amma, Appa, watch this. He guided his sisters into their first horse stance, their tiny legs wobbling but determined. And as Zara watched the next generation learn the lessons that had saved them all, she understood something her grandmother had tried to tell her years ago. The greatest strength isn't in your fists. It's in your heart. It's in the courage to love when you're afraid, to trust when you've been broken, to build a family from the pieces of your pain. She had come to Los Angeles running from her past. She had found her future in a basement dojo, teaching a lonely boy to be a warrior. And in saving him, she had saved herself. Thank you for staying until the end. This channel has many more captivating stories. Hit subscribe because with your help we keep creating these emotional journeys. Comment below and tell us what you want to see next.